So my name is Joni Parsons. I'm co-creator of Rebel 11 along with Monica Smith, who is on the left-hand side of your screen in the cute little pink neck thingy. We started Rebel 11 about 6 years ago already. I can't believe it. To have edgy, meaningful, timely, and of course, fun events for women. We also hold in-person events here in Seattle and retreats around the globe. Thank you so much for joining us today. So I want to tell you just a little bit about Molbaks, and Nikki is going to be joining us in just a few moments from Molbaks. But I started going to Molbaks when I was a little girl with my mom, and it instilled in me the love of plants. As you can see, I have my tulips from the Skagit Valley Tulip Festival. I have my houseplants in the back, and you should see my garden. It's just exploding right now. But I really feel that beginning with my mom of going and walking through all of the beautiful array of colors, the various different plants, instilled something in me then that is still with me today. And now Molbaks, which is still family owned, has the largest selection of houseplants in Western Washington, which is why we're here today to talk to Nikki Bryant. So Nikki is a houseplant and aeroid specialist at Molbaks. Her love for houseplants began as a form of grief therapy, actually, and that turned into a collection of, are you ready? 200 plants. Nikki enjoys teaching and helping others become more confident in their plant care skills, and that is why we're here today. Hi, Nikki.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
I'm so happy to have you today. So I would love for you to just step back for a moment. And, you talk about grief therapy. I know you had a loss in your family. Can you just share a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So I lost my father to a massive heart attack. And prior to that, just so you know, I murdered every plant that I even looked at. If I looked at a plant, it pretty much withered up and died. So Father's Day came around right after I lost my dad, and I decided I needed something a little bit more alive on my patio, and I got some outdoor plants. And then a friend gave me a house plant, and it spiraled from there.
It spiraled
Being able
up.
to take yeah, right, exactly. Being able to take care of something and watch it grow as I also grew. I of course was in therapy with my therapist at the time, and so watching myself grow and expand on a certain path while I took care of these plants and they also grew, it was a really nice way to heal.
That's just such a beautiful story. There's nothing like a deep loss like that. And to be able to nurture something really helps. So thank you for sharing that story. I really appreciate that. And so that love has really exploded, as we know, to houseplants. But I spent a few minutes with Nikki out at Molbaks last week, and we want to show you a video about light, water, and soil that we did last week.
So we're going to talk about some of the most important aspects of owning houseplants, and we're going to start with lighting. We're going to talk about directional lighting and how it pertains to the windows within your house. So northern facing windows is where we're going to start, and that's going to be your lower light source. That's where you're going to put things like your Sansevieria, your Aglaonemas, your pothos, your ferns. Those guys handle lower levels of light and actually thrive in that type of location. Then we have our east windows, which is going to be the higher light plants. That's going to be most of the philodendrons, and your pothos will actually thrive there as well. Then your south facing window is where all of those big tropicals are going to want to live. That's going to be your monsteras, your ficus, your bird of paradise. Those guys absolutely need that bright spot in order to thrive. Then we have our west facing windows, and that's going to be your succulents and cacti and anything that really wants that harsh evening sun. If you don't have good lighting in your home, you can absolutely supplement it with a grow light. And if you have a blue grow light, you're gonna look more towards the foliage type of plants. Your purple to reds is more for your flowering guys. Succulents do great with those. And then we have our white full spectrum lights that can handle just about all of your plants and give them that extra boost that they need. The next thing we're going to discuss is watering, and there are a number of techniques, and there are definitely going to be ones that'll fit into your busy or less busy schedule. So we're going to talk about top watering first, and that's simply when you take your plant. This guy is quite dry, by the way. You can tell he's dry because he pulls right out of his pot. So you can take your guy and just put him under the faucet and run it thoroughly until you see water come out the bottom and you notice a weight difference within your plant. That is one way to water. The other way to water is to bottom water, and it's honestly my preferred method. Having hundreds of plants myself, it saves me a lot of time because I can go a longer distance in between watering my plants. So what you're gonna do is take a basin and fill it with water and simply set your plant in there for a solid 30 minutes. And you can leave it in a little bit longer if you want, but I find that 30 minutes gives it enough time to absorb what it needs and not overwater the plant. And that's the key point here with bottom watering, is you're allowing the plant to take the moisture itself, which leaves you with a less chance of having your plant rot. So this guy will sit here for quite a while, and when he is done, he will get to go back out on the floor to find his new home. Lastly, we're going to talk about the potting process and what you pot your plants in, so your soils and substrates and the components within them and how it benefits your plants. So I am going to take this beautiful Hoya here, and I'm going to pot it with a chunky mix that has some leca and cocoa husk and some perlite and pumice in here. And the chunkiness of the soil allows the drainage to go through really easily while aerating the roots at the same time. So there's gaps in between the soil so the roots don't get bogged in there and cramped and rotted. So our first step we're going to do is I'm going to take off our little hangy bobbers because they just get in the way. And then I'm going to very carefully take the plant out of the pot, which involves squeezing the bottom around the base like so, and that's going to loosen up the soil along the side of the pot. And then very carefully hold the top of the plant and tip it upside down like so to release your plant from the pot. From that point, I'm going to get most of this soil off because I really don't want this thick chunky soil or non-chunky soil around the roots. I want to put it with the aerated good chunky soil. So I'm going to gently massage the root ball, like so. And while I'm gently massaging, I'm going to talk about a couple things that most people don't really think about when they're potting their plants, the do's and don'ts. I will tell you, don't put rocks in the bottom of a pot that doesn't have drainage. You're actually going to increase the risk of damaging your plant and rotting it instead of helping it. That is a big one I hear a lot. Another one, oh boy. Another one I hear often is doing more than one plant in a pot at a time, and that is absolutely fine. You can put more than one plant in a pot as long as they have similar care, because they'll actually increase the humidity within each other. So this guy is looking pretty good. You can see he's got a good root system here as we break this up. And I have a decent amount of soil taken off of this guy. You can see my nice little pile I have going here. And so I feel pretty confident about putting him in his new pot at this point. Maybe a little bit more. We'll get a little bit more off. So we're going to let him hang out there for a second. I'm going to open my bag. And what I'm going to do to start is put a nice layer of soil substrate at the base of the pot. And I'm only going to do a couple inches to begin with because I really want my plant to have a little bit of room at the bottom to expand itself. And you can see that there. I got a nice little layer. And then I'm going to take my plant, quickly massage a little bit more, and set him in there. And you will be able to see that I have a little bit of a gap between the pot and the root system here. And I'm just going to fill the soil in around that and make sure that he feels comfortable and kind of squished. Hoyas really like their roots tight in their pots, and so You don't want to go up too much when you're repotting a Hoya. And she won't have to repot this plant again for at least a year. Honestly, she could probably get away with 2 if we're being realistic here. So I'm just going to finish filling in around this plant. Give it a little shake, make sure the substrate moves into those little crooks and crevices. Move them around a little bit, get a little bit more room. And like that, we have a freshly potted Hoya in a beautiful recycled pot. And that is your potting process.
That was fabulous. Thank you so much. Yay. And I have to say, here is my beautiful Hoya that Nikki potted for me a couple weeks ago. And I just want to talk about this pot really quickly because she said it was a sustainable pot. Can you just tell us briefly about this? Because I think this is so interesting.
Yeah, those pots are amazing. It's a new line at Molbak's, and they are made from renewable resources. So I believe the one that you have there was the cocoa husk one, if I remember correctly. And they have some made out of like rice husks and coconut, like, you know, like the inner part of the coconut. And so it's all of these renewable resources that have been recycled into containers, and they're compostable too. And so when you're done with it,
love that. Molbak's is focusing a lot on sustainability. So they have a lot of products that are sustainably minded, and, everything that we'll be talking about today has some sustainability part of it. So, but let's do our deep dive now. That was so interesting. And we're going to talk a lot more about light, water, and soil. And we are going to go and talk about light first. So you'll get a little bit more detail here. And I have some questions, and I know you will too. And again, just put those in the chat and we'll get to those when we can. Go ahead, Nikki.
So this is my adorable little diagram, and it's showing that directional lighting that I originally talked about in the first part of that video. And so where it says bright indirect light, there's a little sign back there that says east. So that's our east facing window. And honestly, my giant Monstera is in my east facing window too. She's about 7 feet tall and absolutely loves it.
Yeah, so just hold on for 1 second. So I want everybody to think about their house and what direction everything faces, so that this will make a lot more sense. Yesterday when we were going through this as a run through, I was like, okay, now where am I? Okay, so go ahead.
Yeah, so east is sun rises in the east and sets in the west, so that should help a little bit there. So your south window is going to be your bright, harsh window. That's where your big leafy tropicals are going to go. You can see there's a fiddle leaf fig sitting in that corner right in front of that window, and there's a cacti sitting there as well. Those guys really love that harsh sun. Next to them, in that medium indirect light spot, you'll see that there's, pretty sure it's supposed to be a pothos up there on that shelf. And it looks like a Hoya up there as well. And those guys really like that bright indirect light, although Hoyas, I will tell you, want their face burned off in regards of light. So the medium indirect light is a great spot for your hanging plants like the heartleaf philodendrons and pothos and stuff like that. And then your bright indirect light there on the table, you see a little happy pilea, the little they call them the friendship plant, I think is another name for it. And so that's a great spot for plants like that. And then your low light in the back, the little lonely ZZ back there on the wall, those guys can handle almost nothing. And same with the Sansevieria, the snake plants, or mother-in-law tongue is another name. Those guys can handle almost no light as well. But just keep in mind, the less light you give them, the less water that they need, because they do overwater easily.
So with the medium indirect and the low light plant, you said that those can kind of maybe even be in the same location. Is that right?
Some of them are interchangeable a bit. And I honestly have almost all of my hanging plants. I counted them last night. There's 15. They're in my east and southeast windows. That's pretty much all I got in this house. So all my hanging guys are in that area, which is going to be that bright indirect light, and they really do thrive in that spot. But I have one in my bedroom that has no light at all.
This is so helpful. Okay, let's go to the next one. So we're going to go through each north, south, east, and west. So let's start with the north.
Yeah, so north facing is going to be your ferns. They do really well in those low light spots. They're a higher humidity plant, so keep that in mind when owning ferns. Your pothos, those are your beautiful hanging draping guys that I discussed a minute ago. Syngoniums are the arrowhead shaped plant, and they do great in quite a few environments, actually. They're a great plant. Your peace lilies, keep in mind those guys are not great for pets. I know we had some pet friendly discussions on there, and peace lilies, the leaves themselves can be toxic and the flowers are the worst part. And then snake plants, they can pretty much live anywhere, honestly.
So good to know. I have like 3 in my house.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the east.
East window is really one of my favorite spots. So that's where your orchids and African violets and those beautiful flowering plants can live. Your dracaenas, the ones you have behind you over there, Joni, those are dracaenas. Those guys do great in an east facing location. Your snake plants are on that list once again. And then the Chinese evergreen, and Aglaonema is its name. But yeah, those guys do great in that spot.
Okay. South
facing window. If I had one, honestly, I would probably have my Monstera pulled just a little bit back from my south window. But that's where your cactus, succulents, aloes, there's our snake plant
is everywhere.
they can live just about anywhere. So they deserve to be there too. Your Hoyas, they can do east, or they can do south or west. And then spider plants. Spider plants really do enjoy light. And they're very pet friendly, by the way, for those pet friendly people. Spider plants, I refer to them as sacrificial cat plants. Cats love them. So it's a great one to have.
Okay, and we'll talk about those pet friendly plants in just a moment. Can you go back, please? West.
So your west window has great evening light. It's going to be the harshest sun, and that's your cacti and sorry, my cat. It's your cacti and succulents, aloes, crotons are those beautiful like yellowy, orange, and green plants. They do great there. Your bird of paradise, Hoyas, and again the spider plants.
Okay, a couple of questions. So we've had several questions about pet friendly. Why don't you start with what is not pet friendly so that we have a good list of those?
90% of the plants are not pet friendly. So it's going to be a very long list. I will tell you the ASPCA has the best list of pet friendly plants. They really, truly do. And as far as where to go, if you're looking for pet friendly, go straight to the Calathea table. They're a little finickier, they like humidity, but they are completely pet safe, and it's a great one to have in your house if you have lettuce eaters, as I like to call them.
Okay, I have 2 dogs that love to do that. So I did not see the begonias on your list. And I just purchased these when I was out there because I couldn't stand it. They were so gorgeous. Look at how beautiful those are together. Yeah. Where would these go?
Begonias are a flowering plant, and they really do like that indirect light. And so I would put them in your east window, honestly, or somewhere close to that. Okay. And keep in mind, those guys do really like to trellis up. So it's going to get a little bit more length to it, and then it's going to climb wherever you put it.
Okay. And then let's talk about humidity in each of these areas. What's the best way to do that? What plants like humidity, which plants don't?
Yeah. So your calatheas are going to be humidity lovers, and your ferns are humidity lovers. And I always say that if you have the right lighting in your bathroom, stick those guys in there. they love that added humidity, and you might be able to avoid doing a pebble tray with plants like that. And that's just taking a saucer and putting some rocks in it, sticking water to the top of the rocks and plopping your plant on top. So when the water evaporates, you get that added humidity in that location. Outside of that, there are humidifiers that you can get, and I definitely have those in certain spots in my house. I do clumpings of plants so that I can kind of hit everybody at the same time.
That's great.
Uh,
And you,
yeah.
you have to have a schedule in order to get everybody watered and humidified, but we'll be talking about that in a moment. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So let's talk about, growing things in with lack of light. Like you showed me your bathroom yesterday, and there is no, incoming sunlight at all, but you have lights, and you have how many plants in your bathroom alone?
In my bathroom, I probably have close to 40 right now, 45, 50-ish, somewhere around there.
With no light. So let's talk about these different types of grow lights and which ones are the best.
Yeah, of course. So really, it depends on your situation. I personally stick to just full spectrum bulbs. It covers all of my plants. And I have replaced most of the light bulbs in my house with full spectrum bulbs, and my husband doesn't realize it, so that's fantastic. And so my bathroom has four grow lights.
Everybody on this call, don't tell him.
So I have 4 grow lights in my bathroom. And the majority of my plants, those guys that like the higher light, those are on my countertop, which is organized so that there's usable counter space now. And the rest of them, those lower light guys, I see you laughing over there, Heather. Those lower light guys are pulled back around my bathtub, where they still get the benefits of the grow lights, but they really do like that spot. They get the extra humidity. It's near the bathtub and shower. And they really enjoy it in there.
That's great. Okay. And let's, next one, please, Natalia. Natalia's on our team behind the scenes here. So just so you know, we want to thank her for all of her work today. Self-watering plants.
Yeah.
Pots, sorry.
Self-watering pots are great for a number of plant options. And really, your calatheas are going to do great in those self-watering pots. So if you have those lettuce-eating pets that we discussed, and you really don't want to have to water your plant multiple times a week, shove it in a self-watering pot, and then should be able to, and then you'll be able to maintain it a little bit easier. You just keep that reservoir filled at the base, and you can see there's a cotton wicking there, and that cotton wick pulls it up into the pot to keep that lower level of soil moist.
So one of the things that you talked about in the video was top watering, bottom watering. And I've always top watered. And so tell me about the pros and the cons of all of the above. So let's start with top watering.
Top watering can be fast. You can walk around with a watering can and just water your little plants, kind of walk around, put them under your sink, just hit them really quickly. So it's a great way to get your watering done quickly, but it'll leave you with dry pockets of soil and wet pockets of soil. And so you'll get inconsistent watering that way, which can lead to rot and browning edges on your plants and things like that. So it's really not my personally preferred method, but it works for a lot of people. And if it works for you, that's great. Just keep an eye on those pockets where you water, and so you can kind of distribute it a little bit differently when you do it.
So Nikki, Martha asked about drainage. What do you suggest for drainage in all of your pots? I know some pots don't have, a hole in the bottom, some have a small hole. I mean, I know that you've recommended for some plants that you just do something like this, where you have the pot in there so that it can drain, because there's no hole in the bottom here.
Yeah, no, I think cash pots are a great option, those pots with no drainage. And I mean, the majority of my plants live like that. They're mostly in their nursery pots. It's way easier to deal with them that way. Like I've got 3 right here that are all in their nursery pot. And so I can just grab everybody and plop them in a bin of water and set them there for a half hour and go do what I need to do around the house, and then come back and pull them out and put a whole new set in. And so it makes watering a lot easier that way. And so I honestly just prefer to keep them in their nursery pot. And that way you can play magical pots too. So if you get sick of a pot and you're like, oh, I wish that plant wasn't in that pot, you don't have to completely up pot it. You just kind of pop it out and put a new one in.
It is fun to switch things out all the time. So since we're talking about watering, what about orchids? I've heard ice cubes is a good solution.
So I will tell you, I am not a huge fan of ice cubes, but there are some people that for their schedules, that is the best way they maintain their plants. And as long as your plant is getting water and you are maintaining your plant in a healthy way, I'm glad it works for you. That being said, orchids should be in bark. Most of them prefer to be in bark, like the Phalaenopsis, the big curvy ones that we all know. And the best way to go about that is to soak it in water about every 7 to 10 days for about 10 minutes, just to rehydrate that bark. And they typically do great with a schedule like that.
Okay, and Annie, Master Gardener here. Thank you so much. No ice cubes. I am going to say a confession. I've always used ice cubes and it's kept my orchids alive. So I'm going to try something new, even though that's worked for me. So thank you, Annie. I appreciate that. Okay, let's go to bottom watering. Pros and cons.
Bottom watering is, like I mentioned, my favorite method. I have pictures on social media on my accounts of watering day where my teenager can't shower or take a bath, and neither can my husband because the shower and bathtubs are just filled with plants all day long.
That's because you have 200.
I have more than that. We just cut it off there and pretend like I only have 200.
Okay.
So yeah, I cycle through them and put them in my bathtub on watering days. And so for me, bottom watering is a little bit easier. What do you put on the bottom of the pot? Sorry, I'm reading. But as long as you leave it in there for about a half hour, you're going to get a good absorption unless your soil is hydrophobic. And so if you're noticing that your soil isn't absorbing the water, you can always take a chopstick and kind of poke some holes in the top and aerate it yourself, and then water from the top, and then continue to soak it in the bottom until you notice a wateable difference.
Would you recommend doing that with the chopstick and aerating it when you are bottom watering as well? So top and bottom? Or
you can. No. I do that if I notice that my plant isn't really soaking up the water well enough. Kind of break it up in there, and usually that's due to neglect on my part from ignoring my plants for far too long. And so they kind of deserve a little bit of extra love in that case because it's my fault. But yeah, no, it can be a beneficial little tactic.
And the height of the water again was a half an inch, right?
No, I usually do about 4 inches of water, or I'll fill up a large bowl and stick it in there, and then it'll take what it wants, and then put another one in, and it will take what it wants until I run out of water, essentially.
Wow. So great tips. All right, let's go to the next one, which we already, so this might make more sense now. So let's go back and talk a little bit about self-watering plants. This is a great idea if you're going on vacation, if you want something that will take care of itself for a while. So let's talk about the pros and cons of this.
Yeah, so self-watering pots can be pretty expensive, I will say. So that's a big con, is it can take an initial budget. Pros is you can take those really thirsty plants and it gives you the opportunity to ignore them a little bit. I know we're all really busy adults, and so not all of us have time to water plants, multiple times a week. And there are certain plants that it really isn't the best option for. They do really like to dry out in between, so you can't use it for all plants.
Okay. And then one of the things I was wondering, I water every plant every week on Sunday, and that's not really what you recommend. So can you talk to us about like the pros and cons of, overwatering versus like maybe some plants might need every 2 weeks versus once a week.
Yeah. So, as much as I like to treat my plants like toddlers and put them on a really great schedule, my life doesn't always work that way.
All my toddlers have been getting watered every week.
They are hydrated. If and your plants honestly might be acclimated to that and used to that routine. And I try to look at the plant and see if it's thirsty. And it takes a lot of practice to get to the point where you can look and touch a plant and be like, oh yeah, no, you're ready for a drink. And occasionally I miss it because somebody's tucked behind somebody else. But usually I stick to right around every 7 to 10 days ish for most of my plants. So you're not too far off on that once a week thing. Some of them might just not quite be ready. And so you just jump ahead a little bit. So my one concern with that would be, over time, if you keep jumping ahead, then you end up getting waterlogged and rotten.
So Diana and Sarah both had a question regarding what do you do with leaves that have the dried out and dead spots? Do you cut those out? Do you take the whole leaf off? What's the best route?
So I will tell you, aesthetically speaking, that is up to you entirely. This is so convenient that I have one right here in this one spot. This guy is a fallen over chia fence. This guy, plants is like working with pets, guys. They kind of have a mind of their own. Oh, that guy's tall.
And you talk to them as much as I do, it sounds like, Nikki.
I definitely talk to my plants.
I talk to my plants all the time.
So this guy is a philodendron pasta, and he has this leaf, and he has had it for about a month, and I just kind of leave it there. I say it's like additional character at this point. The rest of the leaf is still completely healthy. The outer edge is just, it's crispy. It's like a little plant crouton right now. And so really realistically, I could just very gently pull this brown edge off. And
you wouldn't pull the whole leaf off then?
I personally won't. You totally can. If aesthetically it just drives you insane. And I have friends that do that they cannot stand brown edges on their plants, and they will get rid of that leaf entirely just because it just doesn't look good aesthetically to them. I say that leaf is still photosynthesizing and giving something back to the plant, so it gets to stay.
That's great. What about a moisture meter? Does that help at all?
So moisture meters can be really beneficial for some people that can't figure out a watering routine. And I think they work better for the larger pots. So if you have those, 12-inch pots with a giant ficus in it, you're not going to be able to stick your finger down all the way to the bottom of the pot, and see if that soil is still moist. And so moisture meters are beneficial in that way, in my opinion, for the larger plants. The smaller ones, I like to touch the soil and see where we're at. And, most of them are nursery pots, so I can check on the underside and see where the, moisture's at on the bottom as well. So that's another benefit to keeping your guys in nursery pots.
Okay, so let's go to soil. Oh, no, I skipped. Watering hacks. Let's talk about this before we go to soil. Self-watering, we already talked about that. Long-term, I think this is so funny, and I'm not sure that it really works, but it's a great image.
It is funny, and I mean, there is a little level of truth to it. You can hook up an IV bag and, water your plant over time. You're gonna have those.
I'm like, how long does that last? And she goes, maybe 2 days. I'm like, well, that's not worth it if you're going on vacation and you're gone for 2 weeks. So
yeah, no, I think the better vacation hack is the one I discussed with you yesterday, where you take one of those, dog watering bowls that has like the huge 2-gallon thing on top of it, and put some cotton wicking all the way from your plant into the watering bowl, and have some, totally bizarre setup with all these wicks going in there. That would be a good vacation plan. But yeah,
Or a good friend, which is
or
probably
friends.
the best one.
Yep.
So let's talk about additives here. So we have some DIY, but also some great other ideas. So fish water, if you happen to have a fish, you have one fish. So tell
I
us how
do.
that works.
I got my fish specifically for his poop. He is loved. So I keep my fish and I use his water during water changes to water my plants with. And it's a natural fertilizer and it's a great resource for fertilizer. I would pick fish poop over any of the bottled fertilizers any day. So,
Okay. Well, since we're talking about natural ones, we'll
yeah.
come back to the liquid fertilizer, but banana peel, I thought this was super interesting.
Yeah, banana's a great source of it's a heavy in phosphorus. So you take a banana peel and you stick it in a jar and fill the jar with water, mason jar, and screw the lid on and put it in your refrigerator overnight. And then the next day you can water your plants with it.
Okay, I have a question about the really cold water. Do you wait till that gets to be room temperature or do you use the cold water?
I really truly wait. I mean, you don't have to, you can mix it in with, your other water and dilute it more if you want, or there's, lots of options. And I mean, it's like what we discussed with the ice cubes, it kind of shocks the root system. So I let mine sit on the counter for probably an hour before I use it.
Yeah, I do too. I never use a really cold water when I water. So worm castings.
Yeah, Annie, it does have a lot of potassium in it too. It really does. Worm castings are fantastic. You can use them to make worm casting tea. So, same thing. Soak your worm castings in some water and water your plants with it. You can sprinkle it just on top of the soil to help refresh the soil a bit. Keep in mind, if you have pets, it is worm poop and they will probably dig in your soil if you just sprinkle it on top.
Okay, and then those liquid fertilizers, all natural, of course, and sustainable. We don't ever want to put anything that's not organic on our plants in our home, particularly for the animals. But tell us about these two you have here.
Yeah, so there's a seaweed extract, and then Dr. Earth and Molbak's carries both of these, by the way. The seaweed extract is my personal favorite. You dilute it in your water before you water your plants with it. So it is truly an additive, but it's a fantastic one, and you can use it on any of your houseplants.
So Nikki, this is a great question. As far as how often you fertilize your plants, is there a time frame that's better than another?
Some plants are honestly hungrier than others. I try to do the majority of my plants once a month from March until October, and then I hit them once in December.
Okay, picking the correct substrate. Thank you for everyone for your patience. So let's go to the next one. Okay, the pros and cons of cocoa. How do you pronounce that?
Coco coir.
Coco coir.
Yeah. So coco coir, and a lot of you notice when you bring plants home from the nursery, it's usually in coco coir. And it's in that for a reason, because it does a great job of absorbing and retaining moisture. And in hot houses and nurseries where all of those plants are grown, it is consistently about 80 degrees and 80% humidity. And so they get watered really frequently because they're using so much energy and so much moisture to grow. And so that's why they're in that substrate, is because it allows the nurseries to go a longer duration in between watering all of those hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of plants. And so when you get it home, the watering is going to change because you don't live in a hot house. And so if you have a moisture loving plant like those calatheas and ferns, this is an okay substrate to keep them in because they really do like that moisture, and you're just going to go a little bit longer in between watering them than what the greenhouse would do.
So Nikki, I want to ask you a question really quickly, because when you transplanted my Hoya for me, you took it out of the pot, the nursery pot, and you took more soil off of that plant than I ever have on any plant. That's one. Two is you said never use that soil again. unless you do what? So talk to me about why you don't use that soil from the nursery and why it's important to transplant into a different type of soil.
So for that Hoya specifically, Hoyas really, they like to go a long time in between watering. They're okay being dried out a bit. And so the substrate that I put yours in gives the aeration for the roots. And that cocoa husk helps to pull in that moisture and it releases it evenly. And we'll discuss that down the road a little bit. But the reason I took so much off the root system to begin with, and if I'm going into a similar substrate, I won't do that. I'll disrupt the roots very little because I don't want to stress it out more than I have to. But in this case, I was doing a complete substrate change. And so I wanted to make sure that it was getting the benefits of the new substrate and the watering wasn't going to be off because it had a less chunky mix around part of the roots and more chunky around different parts.
And then that soil you just toss.
I did. And you can take that soil and bake it in the oven and reuse it if you want to. I just like to make sure that there's no friends in it. That's what we'll call them. We'll call them friends.
Oh, friends.
You know, these plants are grown with thousands of other plants. And so everybody's cuddling and you don't know what's in that soil. And so reusing it for your plants at home, it's like playing Russian roulette there a little bit. And sometimes it's best to just avoid any potential issues and just bake that soil if you want to reuse it.
And then what temperature do you bake that at?
250 for about 30-40 minutes.
Okay, great. Okay, let's go to the next one. So cocoa husk. I love this one.
I love cocoa husk. It is one of my favorite substrates, and most of my Hoyas are in a soil-less substrate. So similar to what we did for you, I do the majority of its cocoa husk with some large perlite, and I mix a couple other fun things in there. But cocoa husk has this amazing ability to pull moisture in and retain it, and then release it appropriately into the root system. So cocoa husk is a go-to for me. I actually prefer it over what other fun things? I actually prefer it to bark. So it's my number one go-to personally.
And this is such a renewable and eco-friendly option, which, you know, is something that is really important to me. So I like cocoa husk a lot. Let's go to the next one. So here's all the different types of soil options. So let's talk about all of these, or a little bit about a few, maybe.
Sure. So the cocoa coir we discussed, pumice is a great one for those succulents. You can replace that with a lava rock if you want, or combine it with a lava rock for succulent soil. Orchid bark is another great option. It's fantastic for orchids, clearly. Charcoal I put in almost every single one of my mixes because it helps regulate things. So it keeps that chance of rot down because it filters through the soil. Worm castings, another great thing. So if we scooch on over, I will talk about coffee really quickly. So coffee grounds, and you can use it for a lot of plants, but I will tell you, use discarded coffee grounds. I want you to make your coffee first to pull acidity out of the grounds and then use them on your plants. Because a lot of plants can't handle unused grounds because the acidity is too high. Yeah. And then eggshells are fantastic. You can use them on your outdoor garden, indoor garden. You should clean them and bake them first. Should. I personally don't, but you should. And just grind those bad boys up and sprinkle them on top of your soil or mix it in your mix.
And then somebody asked if you could do the cocoa husk with other soil.
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, there's really no rule, is there, to what you can combine, or is there?
There really isn't. I mean, there's the correct properties for certain plants and what you should use. But no, there is no golden rule of what you should mix with what.
That's always good to know, because I've always mixed a lot of different things in my potting. So, so somebody asked, what are the percentages? I'm not sure if that matters.
So those percentages is for a certain specific mix. If you wanted to do a mix similar to that, I would replace pumice with perlite, and coco coir. I would use a really good soil base
So
and go from
Doug,
there.
Doug wanted to know about perlite. What is that exactly?
So perlite is really, it adds some chunk to your soil and it filters the water out. And it's honestly not one of the best options, but it's a good one.
And then for those of you who are in the Seattle area, Woodland Park Zoo does have some zoo dew available, which is always good for, I'm not sure in the houseplant arena, but maybe in your garden, you can definitely use it. Starbucks also has grounds to give away, as does other coffee companies. So you can just look or ask if they have their espresso pods ready for people to take away. Any other questions? Oh, Nikki, can you talk about, just saw a question go by there, about propagation of plants.
Yeah, of course. Let's see if I have a friend here that I can point at. Yes, hello, friend.
Hello,
Okay.
friend. Let's see this friend.
So this is a Burgundy Princess Philodendron.
That's beautiful, by the way. Amazing.
You can see this gorgeous stem, right? And
yes,
along the stem, you have what look like little knuckles, or they're called nodes. And these guys, that's where you're going to get your new root system. So when you're cutting back a plant, you're going to want to cut in between those knuckles, so you allow yourself enough space so that that root system can develop. And so for those, like, you know, long trailing plants, it's really easy to see the nodes along the way, and you just snip in between them. And then for most plants, you can put that cutting in water after you let it callus over. That's an important part. Let it sit out for about 10 hours so it can develop like a scab. And then stick it in water near a, we'll say, north or east window for most of them. And then watch your roots grow. And then once you have roots upon roots upon roots, then plant it.
So fun. Things will grow and grow and grow. So you mentioned for this Hoya, again, coming back to my favorite new little plant, well, 3 different plants, but how often should people consider repotting their plants? Thank you, Susie, for that question, and nice to see you.
So most plants, I would repot probably once a year. There are some that grow very, very quickly that you'll have to do multiple times a year, like some of your monsteras. I personally waited with Mancy. I waited 2 years, and it was rooted into its pot, and it was like a giant ball of spaghetti. So I will not go that long with Mancy ever again. But, yeah, most plants you're going to want to redo about every year.
Okay, and then couple of last questions before we end for today. Is a philodendron pet safe?
Nope.
Okay.
Short answer.
If you keep it up high where they can't get it, that would be an opportunity to solve that problem, right?
Yeah.
It's really good to know that most plants are not pet friendly. I did not know that. I think cats get around a little bit more than dogs do, but
they do. Yeah. There's varying levels of toxicity too. And so certain plants are just going to make your pet vomit, and then other plants will send you to the vet. I will say the one plant I will never own in my house, and 90% of my plants are not pet safe, and I have 3 cats. And I'm really lucky that they leave my plants alone. So I will never own a Dieffenbachia. Dieffenbachia, they are structured in a way to where their leaves are like fiberglass. And so they really just punch in any toxins that are in those leaves, even for us. So if we're gardening or, you know, repotting, if you squeeze a leaf too hard, it'll actually leave blisters on your hands. So Dieffenbachias are one that just, they're not ever going to come in my house, which they're beautiful. So it's unfortunate, but yeah.
I know some people grow herbs in their house. Are those safe for cats? I mean, it depends on the herb, I suppose.
Yeah, it really depends on the herb. And I personally am not very well versed in herbs, so I'm not gonna approach that topic just because I don't want to give the wrong information. But I mean, I would always do some research on whatever you're bringing in your house.
Yes. Nikki, so informative. Oh my gosh. I feel like I've been to Houseplants 101, and we should probably do a 201 at some point because we would love to have you back. This is such an important topic. I have to say that my houseplant collection has grown substantially in the last couple of years, and it just feels so good to come into my home to all my friends every day, and adding little friends like I have in the last couple of weeks to my house. It just feels even more cozy, I would say. So thank you so much for your tips. She's a really good plant doctor. If you need more information, we will give Nikki's contact information out. The video will be available on revel11.com after Monday afternoon. And then also all of Revel 11's videos are available on our YouTube channel on Revel 11. So we encourage you to go there for all sorts of information on all kinds of topics. And thank you so much for joining us today. We have really enjoyed this so much, Nikki. I can't thank you enough. There's so much more to come on revel11.com. We're doing Pinchon Gardening School next week with Willie Galloway. She has a lovely book that she's updating, and she's just so fun, and what to do in the garden right now, and so much more. We're also talking about finding solace in nature with Mandalina. She is a favorite of Revel 11, and she has a new book out. And I know all of us have found solace in nature over the last couple of years, and hopefully that's blossomed even more, so you spend more time in nature every day. And of course, we have some upcoming retreats in Sun Valley, and also we have one in Walla Walla coming up in October. And I'm heading to go take 8 gals hiking in the Dolomites in Italy in June. So that's all sold out. But thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you soon. Have a great day. For those of you in Seattle, enjoy this glorious weather.